on Sanjana Ramachandran's book. Famous last questions. And the other book was called Never Logged Out, How the Internet Created India's Gen Z. In recent memory, perhaps the most dramatic economic, social and cultural change across generations in India has taken place starting in the early 1990s, when India embraced consumer capitalism and was swept by the technological revolution of the internet. The two, Ria's book and Sanjana's book, grew up in the crucible of these changes. Sanjana qualifies as a millennial and Ria as a Zoomer. I am a member of Gen X, so you can ask what I'm doing on this panel. But I have twins, a boy and a girl, who are also in Gen Z. And so I read both Sanjana and Ria's book with great interest. Their books consist of a series of interconnected essays that combine memoir, reportage, data analysis and opinion. The authors not only describe how they experienced all these changes, outside changes in their lives, but also discuss and evaluate the wider repercussions of these changes. These books are very insightful, nuanced, courageous, moving, and highly self-aware. One of the main themes underlying the books are the authors' struggles to maintain a connection to their true selves, their search for authenticity and finding fulfillment, both intellectual and emotional, when faced with a cocktail of powerful external pressures and influences that threatened all these goals. These forces include the patriarchal Brahmanical family, the hierarchical corporate workplace, as well as the dictatorship of the algorithms in social media. But I enjoyed both books so much, and they roused my maternal instincts and made me want to say, I am so proud of you.
Oh my God, thank you.
So let's begin with the basic unit of society, which is the family. And I'd like Sanjana to talk about two things that Freud said define our humanness, which is love and work. Let's begin with love and what she experienced of it in her family unit.
Hi, thanks. I'm very excited to be here. So I think setting the stage with family and love is a good point. So my book basically starts with how I felt growing up in a Tambrand family that had just moved to Bombay. It was a very conservative kind of environment, and soon I was exposed to very different values in school and soon through the internet. And there's a lot of differences between, and especially TV and English TV, where parents knock on their children's doors and ask them how they're feeling, and where I was at home you had like emotionally locked up parents. You'd sense the heaviness of being in that environment as a child and you wanted to escape. And you had these ways of escaping outside home. So, you end up coping by having like a split personality almost. Like there's one version of me that I'm allowed to be outside home and one version of me that will get me accepted at home. So what you have is a very conditional model of love that it's almost like a false self that you develop in order to appease the powers that be. And it's not about parents in particular, because they were influenced by whatever they were told is, a legit way to be a person. So when I was growing up, that was like you had to be an engineer, get into IIT. I'm sure that's still familiar, if slightly different. This is where I really miss Ria's presence, because she would have been able to insert how it's changed for her generation. But so that's kind of so basically the model is a conservative family unit with very rigid gender roles, where the man should be the one working, the woman should be the one nurturing, taking care of the kids at home, and she shouldn't be if she's working, it shouldn't be more than how much the man works, and she should come back home earlier and sort of not talk on the phone late at night and stuff like that. It's absurd to hear now, but I think that's also why it was important for me to tell the story, because wherever I've gone, I've always, the concept of privilege is also, I think, a little monolithic, because people assume you're privileged, but it happens in privileged households too, that these caste-based gender roles exist, and when they're not being lived up to, they produce these violent reactions in people, right? Not just in men, but also women who've internalized that this is the way you should live your life. And my life outside of home was not that serious. Like I was, I was into many things and like academically curious, which is why it was also possible to live up to these ideals. But like as you grow and you enter adulthood, you start to question what was handed down to you. And I think the pandemic was a pivotal, that was when it happened, because we all thought we were dying and there was a lockdown and people were going crazy in their rooms and making reels, and I was just like, what is happening? Like all the influences that come down upon you, like you had to contend with them all at once in your room. And I was like, okay, these are all the versions of me that I've been straddling, and there's one version of me at home, there's one version of me online, there's one version of me, like what is the self basically, because who am I? So it was just like this spiraling that made me just want to investigate the structure of the self. So that's the premise, that's the first chapter, is like what is the self, and then I start to ask the things that shaped various aspects of selfhood, like where you work is central to your self-concept, and how the kind of work you do, and the kind of relationships you have, how your body looks and how you feel about that body image and what you've been told about it, the kind of relationship ideals you have, the people you pray to, what religion, spirituality, all these things mean to you. So it was just like, who am I and where did I come from, and what's left when it's not all of these things.
But in your family, you do write that it was your mother who ultimately worked, and that was also a huge part of the friction.
Yeah.
Because your father lost his job and your mother had to work.
Yeah.
And that played a very strong role in determining what happened. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think it's like a classic male complex kind of thing where like you are dominant and she should be submissive. And also I think it's a punishing ideal for men also, which is why I think the patriarchy is really sad, because I think men think they're benefiting from it, but actually they're really hived off from their wholeness. So they think that they're only legitimate if they're doing all of these things, like being the provider or living by these gender roles. But if you can just be like, maybe that's not for me, and you can be a different kind of husband or different kind of father, and you both agree to it, it should be fine. But I think we punish ourselves when we internalize what society has defined as the right way to be. So that had its consequences, and consequently, you should read the book for the full story of what happened. But that was a big tension point, and I think it also influenced my ideas of so achievement was front and center, and achievement as they defined it. So it was like, being good at math and coming first at everything, and if not that, then how are you going to, Tamilians are supposed to be good at studies, and Brahmins are you don't, now we have awareness of what that is, but at the time when I was a kid, I was just like, okay, this is just a thing that I'm supposed to do, and people around me do.
Yeah, it was what I call an emotional dark age, actually. So people were just doing what they had been conditioned to doing. And in this, you also write that in this family unit, the Brahmin woman, controlling the Brahmin woman is pivotal in maintaining the caste order, and especially her sexuality, because the whole caste system is premised on Brahmin women not having relationships with anyone lower down the order, because that means that you're overturning the whole caste system. So that also meant controlling your sexuality, your sexual identity, your sexual awareness. So could you, and you've described that in very courageous detail. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so basically, you're a curious person as you become a teenager, and very also confused about what to do and who to listen to. And as I was growing up in Mumbai, we'd moved from Chennai to Mumbai, and a lot of my friends at school had a lot more freedom at home than I did, and they were already they had boyfriends, and I was just like, what is why, how do you go about that? How does one go about something like that? And
how did you go about it?
I've had a lot of success since, but not so much in school. How did you go? One of my friends then was like, you should lose weight. I was a fat kid. I was like 80 kgs when I was 15 years old. We're jumping to the body image part, but I think that's fine. So he was like, you should lose weight if you want to get a guy. And that was also around the time when the movie Tashan featuring Kareena Kapoor released. And I think people from the 90s will remember this image of her stepping out of some ocean in a bikini, and she is thin as a reed, and her skin is glinting, and it is seared into my psyche, and I will never forget it, because all of us then saw, like, my cousin, her friends, and like all our female friends, we got really conscious about every extra percentage of skin that was on us, and we entered like the most obsessive eras of our lives. I mean, it still goes on for me because we're generally obsessive as a culture, I think, but you know, like working out a lot and then tracking your calories and counting how much food you eat and making sure it's a plus or minus. So someday you eat a little more than you should, you subtract it from the next day, and very eating disorder behaviors that you, again, in early 2000s, etc., this was normal and you didn't have a vocabulary for it then. I think we've only developed it now to be like, oh my god, that's kind of sick. But I think we've digressed a bit with this question.
Yeah, so the question is controlling sexuality.
Yeah, so basically the idea was that, you know, you have to get married at some point, but don't do anything right now. And people around me were, you know, growing up and doing things. So I was like curious, and I just think that for women in India, sexuality has just been corrupted, and women in general maybe, but like, you can't be or express yourself fully without someone who is still operating from that conditioning, being like she's asking for it, or like, you know, putting a dirty gaze on sexuality when for you it's no longer, I mean, it's not that, right? It's a part of your self-expression, how you dress and the kind of people you're into, and you shouldn't have to hide that. But I think it was, and I am straight, but for people who had to hide even more, like queer Indians born in the 90s, I think they had a whole coming out journey that others have written about. So it's a whole thing that you have to navigate, this tension between who you're allowed to be at home and who you really are, and how you know, maintain your relationship with your parents and the people who you don't agree with in adulthood when you don't do what they want.
But you more or less ticked all the boxes, at least on the achievement front.
Yeah, like outwardly I was doing everything they wanted, and whenever they weren't looking, I was doing what I wanted. So it had, like, that's what I mean by the split self. And I think ultimately even the things I was doing that they didn't want was only to kind of get that validation that you'd still love me if you found out about this, which is why I think, okay, now you have to find out about this. It's all in this book where I have a dirty laundry list of things I've done that might upset you. But it's a book, so it's fine, you know.
Right. So would you say that you've managed, after writing this book, to develop a more healthy body image?
Yeah, healthier than before for sure. But I think as time, people have in general gotten very fitness obsessed, and they're tracking their steps and their sleep hours, and now there's all these new variables and metrics that you really, I don't think the average person needs to know to be considered healthy, like your resting heart rate and your heart rate variability, that people that I know do keep track of. And I'm like, you're healthy enough, you don't really need to get so obsessed about this and become a little unhealthy in the process of that. So I think that's still, I'm still a little locked in that sense, but it's not as bad as it was before.
Yeah. So let's talk about, okay, so you ticked all the boxes, you did engineering, you went to an IIM, and then you got into the workplace. And the workplace to you initially meant freedom, because it gave you an income and independence from your family, so you could do what you wanted. Like, you were no longer financially dependent on them. But you also had, you also faced a lot of
I would say front and center that I enjoy thinking and being good at things and being competent, and sometimes you cannot have these pursuits purely because of, like I said, people imposing meanings on it. So, but like, I don't think work is not fun for me. I like working. Yeah, and it's not just because it gives me financial independence or freedom from my family. You know, it's like what we would do anyway.
Yeah, but there's a whole chapter in which you do talk about all the problems also of the corporate workplace, of neoliberal capitalism, of the of the kind of relentless drive for profits. And I think you quote a Canadian study, and it sort of evaluated what a corporation would be if it was a human being, and it said it would be a psychopath. So that was, so you're aware of it, but you're also, so that's what I'm saying, this is a very self-aware book, which is that you see that it's a means for independence and self-fulfillment, but at the same time you are aware of its exploitative.
Yeah.
So how did you negotiate all that?
I think it's the hamster wheel, the hedonic treadmill or whatever. You need to keep running on it to feel your baseline level of happiness, stability, comfort, whatever it is. So to the point about, yes, I do think that like the corporate need to grow endlessly and just its managers imposing targets like we need to grow 10-15% every year, and if you ask like who does this really benefit, does the market need more of that product for you to sell, or is it just gonna, because you need those targets to justify the job and everything. Like I think at some point we lost the plot on how much growth is good and what's really necessary. But like, yeah.
So at what point, so you're this kid, you're negotiating all these changes, and you're just sort of living day to day. At what point is there some turning point in which you said, okay, I need to take stock of all this, or there's some, what started the journey of your introspection, of your analysis of society? Because there's a tremendous amount here about caste, about patriarchy, about Jungian psychology. So it's, and you're very young, so at what point did you achieve that kind of detachment towards your own life, towards your own, so because it's very hard, because for us to be detached from our parents and look at them with loving criticality, even that's very difficult. So at what point did that happen, that kind of shift?
So I think the journey, I mean really I think the seed for something like this started when I just joined college, and it was a college with no attendance, bits is like that. So I was part of a lot of extracurricular activities and like writing in theatre, and I was like, actually I think I'm meant for something more creative. That was when it started. And it also seemed like the kind of events I'd seen in my life at home and like the inflection points, it was all like it didn't feel normal to me, it felt movie-like, or at least I was making it a story all the time in my head. Or maybe it's a form of dissociation when you're like, reality is too much, so I'm gonna like storify it to, have like control over, like make meaning. I think it's a common sort of thing that people do. So the process probably started then, but like I said, the real sort of checkpoint where I was like, we're going to die, was the pandemic, right? Like I thought the world was ending and I hadn't done the things that mattered most to me. I just had been running this hamster wheel like everybody else. And so through the pandemic, like everyone else, I threw a lot of darts at the board. I wrote a bunch of screenplays, and the seed for this book probably started then. I was in a job then and I was like, I must start pitching to publications and start writing more. So, and a lot of those articles were like using, like, the story of how I got my name is Sanjana. I'm named after Aishwarya Rai in this 1992 Pepsi ad where she's Amir Khan's new neighbor, and Amir Khan's just moved into a flat, and she goes and knocks on his door and she's like, got a Pepsi? And Amir Khan's like, no, but I'll jump out of the window and get you one. And he comes back with a Pepsi and he's like, what's your name? And she's like, hi, I'm Sanjana, something like that.
Right, I remember that. Even I remember that.
My dad worked in advertising, so he was like, that's a great name. And she's good looking, but she symbolized a certain kind of femininity that I think India wanted of its women then, right? Like she's modern but still like traditional, and sort of that mix of contradictory mix of, don't be too out there, you should still be one of us.
Yeah.
So they named me Sanjana, and I was always like, hey, that's an interesting anecdote. And then when I joined and I got my background in marketing and everything, I told one professor that this is, and he got really excited. He was like, that should be, I'm writing a book, can I use that? And I was like, no, maybe I'll use it for like a piece or something. So I pitched that to 52, and then I put out a tweet asking other Sanjanas to tell me the story of their names. And I also looked at data from electoral records, and it showed that the number of Sanjanas like went way up in the year 93, right after the ad. It was not that big, and then it was like the graph spikes. So it seemed like there was a correlation with the ad and all of the anecdotal Sanjanas that I spoke to. So basically I developed the muscle to connect personal like nothing happens in isolation, I think, and even the things that you think are totally
happening to you. Yeah.
They have a seed in something, and it's about investigating how that started. So that happened, and then everything.
Just 1 second. Just a fun fact is that Ria's elder sister is Sanjana.
Yes, and we connected, and she also
because I saw it in the acknowledgements of her book.
Yeah. And then when we first spoke, I was like, hey, I'm kind of like your sister, but she's not here. Anyway, so yeah, so that muscle of like recognizing that something within you, the seed in you had, where did it really sprout? And like it seemed like a lot of the Tashan visual, for example, and the fact that everybody around me started getting thin around the same time. So like just this, where does a trend really start, and what's the
cultural,
what's the seed of a trend, and how does like the collective consciousness really impact the individual and vice versa? And it turned out a lot, and like nobody's special. So we all think we're like super unique, but actually there's a lot of commonality. I mean, I know a lot of people who've had like this kind of repressed, dysfunctional family childhood thing, and they develop substance abuse issues later, they overachieve. These are all forms of escape. And now the times have changed, so things are a little better, but the world is overall very chaotic, so that confusion of who you really are and what to do, I think, still exists, and it's at the heart of like, how do I live life, what decisions do I make? I think it's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, of course. So of course the Sanjana article was in some way, I mean, it didn't rock the family boat as such. It was a very interesting thing that you...
The family boat remains as it was, because if they were the kind of people who'd read my book and take something off it, I don't think I would have written the book. So nothing has really, nothing has really changed. It's not really like that big a deal. My mom has actually really evolved as a person, because at some point she also was like, you must get married before 30, and she used to buy me gold as a reminder that, okay, gold, I think it signifies marriageable age.
And your grandmother also kept saying
that also. But I think they've all sort of, when I speak my mind over and over again, they'll be like, we should get irritated if we keep bringing it up, and it's not because she's written a book about it that they'll stop doing it, it's just that, I have boundaries now, as adults get to.
So have they read the book? Has your family read the book?
I don't think so, no.
So what is that?
They're just very proud that Shashi Tharoor said something nice about it. And that's what I'm saying, all of the nasty things I might have had to say are made up because it's a book, and it's...
But it's not nasty, I think it's just very honest.
I don't even think it's nasty,
it's just extremely courageous, because, and it's very self-aware, because she also implicates herself. And the things that she's faced at the hands of her parents, she often has taken out on her younger brother. So it's just extremely self-aware, and I think honest in that way. I don't think I didn't sense any holier than thou streak in the book.
There is none of it, right? I think the main point that I was getting to the previous question of what was the turning point and how I came to write it was this thing that I was doing everything right in life, but not feeling great about, because I was checking those boxes, and yet I had this like constant identity confusion. I couldn't be myself at home, which is supposed to be like your primary source of safety and comfort. So I think then what really happened was I went on a Vipassana course in 2021, and that was transformative for me, because
so some of the most lyrical, her last chapter is about her journey into Buddhism. And it's probably one of my favorites, because it's very lyrically written and it's very nuanced. So can you just tell us about your journey and how...
What Vipassana is basically, it's like complete body scanning, and you dissolve this disconnect that we typically have between the mind and the body. And I started to realize that a lot of my symptoms were actually like stored, repressed emotions of anger and frustration from the kind of environment that, kids had that day.
Yeah.
And all of that unraveling, I think, was a lot of information basically about what the self is. It's like this ever-changing thing, and there's conditioning that forms your first half of life, but then after that, you do have this connection to like a deeper well of consciousness that's impersonal and like the collective. So that's where the Jungian stuff comes in, and I found a lot of... Actually, Buddha and Jung talk about the same things. It's not the same language, but the unconscious mind and the capital S self is where they go to. So I think, to summarize, I did see that all of the frustration, it wasn't healthy for me. So producing the book was like a psychological act of healing, to give meaning to everything that had happened to me that I didn't like, and to make something of all of it. rather than like a product that I'm going to, it's a product, you know, like it's mass replicable. It's going to be relatable to a lot of 90s kids, I think, but primarily it was for me.
It's very relatable to me too.
Primarily it was for me to heal from everything that had happened, and I think it has done the job, because now I don't care so much about whatever's happened. Otherwise I was always like child of divorce, victim, no freedom from the start, doing the treadmill stuff, but actually it's held me in good stead, because now I feel like I have this unique perspective on, even in my writing, that combines the things that they made me do, so it's fine.
Yeah, so I think the real insight in that Buddhist chapter is that how deeply the mind is connected to the body and how deeply the individual is connected to society. And I don't think modern medicine really, when you have symptoms of various kinds, I don't think that's the perspective. They just ask, it's very much a body-driven, physical.
Allopathy, or like when you go to a hospital or a doctor with they ask symptomatic level questions. They very rarely go to a diagnosis that's at like a deeper energetic somatic level, and that's where I find like a lot of Eastern ways of thinking. I've actually, because I was very like you know, engineering, sort of what you see is what you get, materialistic, science explains everything, but everything started to change after that Vipassana, and like the kind of, I would highly recommend it. I'm clearly selling it, so yeah.
Yeah, no, and also basically you go to a doctor, they don't ask you what's happening in your family life, or is there violence in your family life.
I don't know if that's the solution. I think we need to take matters into our own hands, because allopathy, it's an industrial complex that treats things, and I mean, they don't claim that they do otherwise, but if they did also, I think it serves its purpose of treating things at a symptomatic level.
Yeah.
But like that self-healing, that, I mean, there are energy healers, I guess, pranic. I don't know about how effective they are. This is what worked for me.
No, definitely, I think from that emotional dark age, there's been a tremendous amount of awareness, and I think books like this do that job of...
yeah, like body keeps the score, and
yeah,
you would hope the body wouldn't keep the score at some point, but it does keep the score and tell you like whatever you...
Bessel Candlecourt.
Yeah.
And let's just shift gears before we go to the Q&A about your writing. And were you always a reader, and which writers were you inspired by? And, you know,
yeah, I always like, my mom gave me my first book when I was like 4 or 5, and she was like an initiation from Enid Blyton and Agatha Christie to Harry Potter, the fandom that I was part of with everyone else my age, and then I started having my own tastes and picking up things that my friends would recommend to me. So like, you know, Ayn Rand was a big thing, but I think she's hugely unpopular now, but I want to revisit her work as an adult and see, she has like some decent arguments about capitalism, I think. This one, P.G. Wodehouse, those were the things that I was reading. My mom also let me read Sidney Sheldon and Jeffrey Archer and sort of the smutty type of... So I started reading all of that, and then through college, like the questions that I had about the world sort of informed my reading choices. So I chanced upon the new journalists, like 1960s American writers who started to like... Well, journalism is typically like, you know, factual writing, it's kind of dry, and they induced subjectivity into it and characters and color, which was really appealing to me. Because I did want to read about real things also, but with that flair. So that became a favorite.
So any favorite new journalists from that movement?
Tom Wolfe. And I also write all of these epilogues, these influences in the epilogue of the book. I really like David Sedaris also as a person. He's very funny and honest about family. His sister killed herself, and like he calls his dad an asshole pretty openly. So I think these are hard things to write and talk about, but I think we all feel some level of these tensions, like things you're not supposed to say, but you do feel, and writers give voice to that unspoken, they say the quiet part out loud, and it is a hard thing to do. But I think if that's done, it's like the main job.
So how did you write? You had a full-time job?
I was working on this, I just found the time, I think. It's like, I don't have any time management, productivity advice.
How many years did you take to write this, or how many months?
The raw writing was 9 months long, which is about gestation, pregnancy-wise also. So I think of it as a baby, I guess. But the whole thing from like pitching the book, it was part of a fellowship called South Asia Speaks, which helps, you know, writers, pairs them with mentors and puts them in touch with the industry. So all of that took probably a year and a half or two before the writing itself. So I would say I had the idea in 2020, and South Asia Speaks happened in 2021 or 2, and then I wrote it probably in 2023, mid to 2024, and then it was up in April 2025 with editing. And is this interesting? The exact timeline?
No. And then, now that you're done, what do you feel?
I feel relieved, honestly. I feel like this thing that was at the back always, like it's a burden off my back, and like I can like sort of live again. Like I'm not recovering or healing from something all the time. I'm just living.
Did you ever have cold feet, like you're putting all this really raw stuff?
No, I feel like it was meant to be. And like I said, it was like a psychological production.
Writing as therapy almost.
Yeah, writing as therapy rather than whatever else it could be. Yeah.
So I think we have 10 minutes. So can we open it up to Q&A, please?
Do we have questions from the audience?
Hi, my name is Shubhangi, and you spoke a lot about body positivity and how like mainstream body images affect like our own like perceptions of our own body and everything. I wanted to ask your opinion on the whole like being skinny is looking good thing. It's coming back up again, especially on like social media and everything. So just your thoughts on it and how. So I'm a college student now, and so like how can we navigate through it now at this point in time?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I think we did go through a wave of like where fat shaming was like completely unacceptable, and now like with conservatism coming back up, it's like actually skinny is the archetype of like good-looking women. And I think I would say that especially if you're growing up now, you have so many influences, you're consuming so many images and ideas of how you should look. You have to completely shut them off, be comfortable in how, I mean, I think confidence and hotness can also come from within. Like if you think you look good and you can dress up however you want and just carry that energy, that's more than enough. You don't have to look a certain way. And I really hope that women just start doing that. Like I think that was the transition for me to start feeling healthy also, because like strictly speaking, I'm still fatter than I'm supposed to be. But I don't mind it because I think I look good and inspiring.
Any more questions?
Hi. Hi Sanjana, thanks for the amazing session. So as a millennial, so I just wanted to get your view on the topic which you came against in the beginning. So what would be your advice to millennials vis-a-vis the current Gen Z which is coming? Asking specifically in terms of like the workplace, like where they're joining the workforce and they are more candid and like carefree about it, and if they don't like a particular job, they're more free to move it, and probably in terms of the relationships and how they go ahead on those lines. Thanks.
I think you could learn from them. Like if there's their freedom, it sounds like their freedom is admirable to you, or their uninhibitedness is admirable to you. So you could just adopt those qualities for yourself. And also, I do think they also struggle with many things. Like, I mean, I don't know this for sure. Every Gen Z is also different, so I don't want to stereotype anyone. But you can also make fun of them if you feel like they're outshining you in the workplace. So I think like be yourself, and that's the main.
More questions? I think we should take one in the back.
Okay. Hi, good evening. It was great listening to you talk. So one question, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So a question that I have is that you just mentioned about how you took 9 months to complete a book, isn't it? The first draft or raw copy or whatever you call it. So was this a deadline that you had imposed on yourself, or you just started writing and it just took 9 months? Like how was the process?
There was a deadline, and I did have a structure for each chapter and what I wanted to cover, and then 8 or 9 such chapters. And I think the deadline got extended once or twice. So I was aiming to do like a certain 1,000 number of words a day, and some days I hit it and some days I wouldn't because I was doing other things or it just wasn't coming to me. But that was the North Star, and eventually you do get there. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any more questions?
Hi Sanjana. From whatever you just discussed with her, the one takeaway I had was somehow I felt that the relationship with your mother would have been extremely complicated, and especially because she was a working mother, she would have been it would have been a very intimidating environment for you, looking up to her and wanting to be like her and following whatever she does. And when you had your own identity, when you realized that a lot of things that was passed down to you isn't really your core, and when you started creating your own identity, how did you deal with the dynamics with your mother? And also in this whole shifting process, what kind of a support system would help when one is trying to cut themselves off from a system that is not working out for them and trying to figure out a new way? What kind of a support system do you think would work?
So to start with, my relationship with my mother was complicated. It's a lot more like a friendship now, but the tension between us was not so much of intimidation, more like she was also a vehicle for the pressures that I was trying to escape, and she herself should ideally have. So that was the lens. And I think if you're trying to navigate or steer these intimate relationships away from what the conditioning is and what you'd like it to be, you have to say what you feel and keep doing it until you're heard. Ideally, you should be heard the first time, but I don't think that's easy. And change is also hard, but eventually I think they'll come around to a new point of view. And if not, then you have to do what's best for you.
Yes, you can continue.
We can take some more questions. We can take one in the back there.
Hi Sanjana, thank you so much for your talk. I have a two-part question. The first one is basically in the era of therapy speak and all of this, and understanding self and introspection is when you've written this book, and I'm guessing it was a very honest and you said it took you 9 months to do the raw writing process. How did you go about narrativizing your life and what to put in and what to leave out? And in that process, how did the sense of self for you change?
I think the narrativizing was happening, like I mentioned, constantly. So whenever something happens in my life, I'm probably trying to tell it as a story. And
Just one thing, did you take notes are you a daily journal?
I do journal a lot. But a lot of the book is stream of consciousness kind of thing. So I did have a structure, but I also just let things come to me within that structure of what I wanted to cover. And really it was from understanding there is a logic to the flow and the things that I was trying to uncover. So like if the question is what is the self and what are all the influences that make a self, that itself is a structure, and you go kind of linearly and then circularly outwards from that, right? And I think your second question was how did you...
The self change in the process.
Yeah, I think there's some wonderful quotes that I'm not going to try paraphrasing, but I think the meaning is like the artist also becomes in the process of creation. So like you are really creating yourself while creating, and in the process of writing this, I think I became, like I said, someone who had gone through a lot of family trauma to someone who's made meaning of it. And that meaning is now less, it's not painful, it's just experience from life and what I've learned from all of it. So I hope that makes sense.
Can we take one last one?
Yeah, we can take, because we have 2 minutes.
I think this will be our last question. There's one in the back there.
Hi, your talk was really relatable for me. So as a young professional who's been working for a few couple of years, just wanted to ask, how do you stop running on this hedonic treadmill? Like, when do you realize that, okay, what do I want to do as a society, or what expectations does my family have for me versus what are my personal goals, what do I want to explore for myself?
The good news is you can choose your own treadmill. But I think the treadmill exists in whatever you choose because you have to keep living and I mean you have to buy your freedom out of the economy because you have to make money to even stop making money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
And how to choose which treadmill and what kind of thing you want to put your energy into is I think like self-knowledge and trying many different things out, going where you're naturally drawn. So if something is calling you and pulling you strongly, I think you should just follow it while making sure the practical things are taken care of and do both of them together until you can afford to do only one.
Thank you.
So I think maybe one more question if there's one.
Is there another question? Can we give the mic over here, please?
Hey, hi Sanjana. I remember that every chapter of your book was phrased as a question, and you did a lot of self-analysis to not per se answer it, but figure out what the question meant to you. After writing the book, I think it's been a year now. Is there any question that you're struggling with now? Is there any self-scavenging that's been going on? Just
I really love that question because it's going on. Like I do feel more at peace after having put it out, but I'm like, what's next? And like the kind lady asked at the back, like, how do you know what's next? And I feel like it's the same variables and the same, like, I want to make a living, but I also want to do things I care about. And I actually do care about the way I'm making a living, but like, what's next? So I think it's a constant, like, you never stop having these questions as long as you're alive. And it should be okay also, because it's part of engaging with life to be like, am I really into this or what's driving me? So I think that self-investigation is constant and I am going through it. But it's less intense and less about healing now. And I can
But do you have a meditation practice or regular thing to keep going?
Yeah, so I did 2 more Vipassana courses after that first one, and I was supposed to go for my 4th sometime this year, but previous treadmills have taken priority. And I try to meditate an hour a day, and I hit it some days and some I don't. Yeah.
So that probably helps.
It's like
right?
going to the gym. I think you have to keep doing it.
Yeah.
As in, like, clear yourself and have like a regulated nervous system and know what baseline feels like, so that fluctuations above.
Did you meditate today?
When I took 10 minutes away from you, I did.
Okay, great. Thank you all. It's been
Thank you so much.
Really good Q&A session. I'm so glad so many young people have come. Great. Thank you so much, Sanjana, for writing this book.